Okay, we're live. Just
Hello,
give a
hello.
quick second for folks to join in. Hey, everyone. Awesome. I see folks joining in. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll be able to answer them live, but we'll go through some of the questions that I have, and then we'll get to the community questions at the end, unless there's anything that is really timely. But I want to thank everyone for joining in. My name's Tay. I'm with Avail. Today we're chatting about Nexus with our Ask Me Anything. We're here with our co-founder Prabal. Prabal, you want to give a quick intro of yourself?
Yeah, hi, nice to meet you all. Thanks, Tay, for having me on this one. I'm one of the co-founders of Avail. Before this, I was leading research at Polygon. Have been building Avail for around 4 years now. Seems like a very long time. Yeah, I mean, I had a pretty research kind of background, so been in the cryptology and security space for more years than I can remember. So yeah, that's me.
Awesome. So for folks that don't know, we're doing our Pass the Block series where we take a deeper look at Avail's tech. We post new articles every Wednesday, and this is our first AMA. So I'm super excited for everyone to tune into this. But hopefully we'll be doing more, especially as we continue to release new products at Avail, mainly Nexus and Fusion. But today we're going to kick off. We're going to talk a little bit about Nexus. And if folks have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat here. Maybe to start things off, Prabal, maybe you can just give a high level intro of Nexus. What is it in, as few words as you can describe it? Because I have a ton of other questions for you.
Yeah, I think Nexus is our response to fragmentation that we see in the rollup space. That is, in general, what we are aiming to do with Nexus. We can talk a lot more about why this fragmentation exists and how we started to end up in this kind of a situation. But at Avail, our belief is that we want to build a complete stack for supporting rollups, and for which the scalability aspect of rollups is what we are solving with DA. And while we see a Cambrian explosion of the number of rollups that are coming into existence, we saw a need for the experience not to be fragmented across these different ecosystems and these different types of rollups, and that's why we are building Nexus.
Beautiful. I think that was succinct. One of the questions, maybe to just kind of frame the problem is, what does the current experience look like for users when it comes down to a cross-chain experience? I'm chronically on chain. I'm having to bridge to all these different chains. I need the right token, make sure that there's liquidity on each chain. It's a bit of a nightmare. But to you, what does it look like?
I think it looks very painful for the average user. That's where I want to start. How exactly it looks like is that I think if I'm a user, I see this new chain, very exciting, looks very promising. I want to interact with the applications that is there on that chain. I want to get involved inside that particular chain and its interactions. What I have to do first is essentially find a way to bridge it, and I make it sound like it's a big deal because apparently it is. If when I was going through, some of the onboarding documentation for many of the, tier one rollups, the bridging is actually not that straightforward. And they expect that this user is so convinced and so impressed and so determined to be on that chain that they will cross bridges, figuratively and literally, to actually go there and interact with their applications. Um, that creates a scenario where only the most skilled ones are able to cross the bridge and reach that island, so to say, because essentially we are creating a structure like that where each of these rollups are individual islands which you have to reach onto. And not only that, think of it the other way around. I go to a particular chain, I do a particular some sort of activity, I have a lot of funds and a lot of artifacts and a lot of assets inside that chain. There is very little way for me to actually bring those assets outside of it. I mean, if onboarding was a challenge, offboarding is a bigger challenge in today's rollup space. And that is where average users remain outside that island because they do not know of the ways and means in which to interact with the applications. And that's not what the rollup centric vision was, right? The rollup centric vision was that the base layer will support all these rollups, and application developers can freely choose any rollup of their choice, which best suits their infrastructure and their technical needs. But today, this is the scenario where application developers have to think of which rollup should they deploy on, or worse, where they have to deploy on multiple different rollups and somehow synchronize their experience across all of it. We want to enable the vision where application developers can deploy on one particular chain, but still get users from all across the other rollups so that the users don't need to know which chain they are interacting with, which chain their application is being hosted on, which DA layer is that on, which settlement layer do they use, etc., etc. Right? So we want to remove the cognitive load that is there for the users, and today that is extremely, extremely high.
And you spoke a little bit about the developer experience. What are devs having to do kind of in this fragmented ecosystem at the moment?
They are having to take bets which they don't understand. If I try to be succinct, right? I mean to be a bit more descriptive about it. Um, as a application developer, there are already enough problems that I need to solve. I need to solve, my contract issues, my application interface, my, user experience, wallet connects, and hundreds of other things, right? I mean, which RPC do I use? Which indexer do I use, etc., etc. Now, take any of these problems, or take all the problems that are there together, and multiply it with the hundreds of chains that are available. Every chain having a different indexer, having a different simulation endpoint, having a different oracle, different infra reliability and such, subgraphs and such, stablecoin support, wallet support, EIP support. It's really really a big problem for the developers. They were just there to build the best application for their users, and suddenly they are being dragged into all the problems and the idiosyncrasies that each of the chains have. That was never the developer experience that we wanted to give to the developers, and this is exactly why we are developing Nexus.
Beautiful. Now, wanted to chat a little bit about, what are the existing interop solutions currently in market? You have bridges, you have aggregators, there's intent bridges now, there's intent frameworks now. What does that landscape look like to you at the moment?
I think that landscape also is a story of many players trying to solve same or subtly different problems in different ways and means. And to be honest, it doesn't matter how that gets done as long as the fragmentation that we are seeing can be removed. So the landscape right now is there are state-based bridges, there are liquidity-based bridges, and there are some form of hybrid bridging as well in the middle. On top of this, there are bridge aggregators, and maybe last day I was seeing a bridge aggregator of an aggregator and such. So I don't know where that stops, but as an application developer, again, coming back to that particular point, if I want to enable cross-chain interactions, I have a few API endpoints that are available today, which make things easier. There is no doubt about it. But on the other hand, that landscape is so fragmented that I do not know what kind of guarantees and what kind of trade-offs am I taking. Uh, the security guarantees are varying in that space. Some are, you know, like trust me, bro bridges, as I like to call them. Some are multi-sig based, some are light client based, some are optimistic protocol based, some are based on the risk being taken up by solvers and liquidity providers and such. Some are, the risk being that you don't know what risk you are taking, right? Um, so it's a bit all over the place. We want to provide the best-in-class security and the best-in-class experience. Of course, you might say that everyone wants to do that. What's the secret sauce here? The secret sauce here is that the rollups that are building on Avail already has um, the the canonical representation of the rollup. That is, they already have the ordering and the consensus that is needed to infer any state on that particular rollup. And that is essentially why we are able to build this nexus with the highest amount of guarantees and the highest level of security.
So if you had to place kind of Nexus within this ecosystem, how would you kind of frame it?
So Nexus kind of is the backend, right? I like to call it as the backend which enables the cross-chain interactions across the rollups in this ecosystem. That is how we like the Nexus to be. Of course, that is the core offering, but through our ecosystem partners and the like the greater um, the players that are building up on Avail and across the space, we think we'll be able to offer much richer tool set to the developer. Like for example, right now we are working with Arcana to have their SDK uh, be enabling the interactions through Nexus when Nexus is available for paths and routes where Nexus is available, but augmenting that with existing bridges where it is not, so that the application developer doesn't need to think about any of this. It doesn't need to get bothered into, what is the guarantee, what is this, what is the speed, what is the security, what is the multisig, is it ZK proof, is it light client, and so on. They can be assured that if I use this SDK on top, I will get the best guarantee that is available. And they can choose a minimum barrier, right? They can choose that I don't want any route which has a speed more than 5 seconds, or I don't want any route which has a security lesser than lifetime security. They can choose any of that. That enables the space where they build their product, they just focus on building their product. Every user which comes to interact with this product can have funds anywhere across the ecosystem. They will still be able to interact without having to think about bridging. That is what we are trying to enable.
So if you were an Avail rollup developer, what would the experience look like to actually integrate Nexus?
So as a rollup developer, it's almost okay. Let me break it down into different parts, right? So if you're a rollup developer who is deploying the rollup, all you need to do is have, for example, a transaction pricing endpoint, which is, I mean, very, very standard, right? I mean, Almost every chain worth its salt already has a transaction simulation endpoint because otherwise no applications can work on top. As a rollup dev, that's all you need. All you need is just a few endpoints which is needed to deploy this SDK, to deploy the infra on top. The bigger thing that a rollup developer can do is essentially nudge its application developers to use this SDK so that no one has to think about the bridging. None of its users have to think about bridging. As an application developer, for them, it's almost no change. It's like you are building anyways a front end and such, or a CLI or whatever. You are building it. You just need to do a few more imports and set up a few configs. That's all you need in order to get that SDK integrated. And once you integrate that SDK, it works with all existing wallets. It works with all existing endpoints, with existing chains and such, right? So for example, let's say I'm launching the Lens chain, which is imminent, by the way. And if I'm launching Lens chain, I don't have to do much. But if I'm, let's say, a developer who is trying to build on Lens, what I will do is I will go and integrate this particular SDK. And once I do that, on day one, what I can do is I can bridge funds from base. A user who has funds on base can seamlessly interact with this application. That's what it enables.
And in the case of an external rollup or blockchain, what would the integration process look like? Is there any differences? Are the assumptions the same? Could you break that down for us?
Yeah, so the experience almost remains the same. There are, of course, for people outside that ecosystem, the guarantees cannot be the same. I mean, theoretically, it cannot be the same. So it's not like we don't want to give those same guarantees, but the reality is that the moment you cross a security zone, so to say, the security guarantees that you get are a bit lower. But to an average user, that will not matter, and hence the experience will be almost no different than when they are inside the ecosystem. So we are trying to give them the best experience that we can, given the best security that we can.
That's a good way of putting it. Um, you know, Whenever we talk about, and I've heard you say this whenever I was visiting the office in Dubai, is you can't have scalability without interoperability. Maybe you can walk us through how Nexus kind of plays a role into that thesis and how it's going to handle the scalability needs of cross-chain applications.
I think one of the major pushes that we have right now within the org and across all our ecosystem is that we want to create the horizontally scalable blockchain vision, right? We want to make sure that every chain that is inside it acts as if it's a same chain, right? One of the major, criticism and valid criticism that has come against this roll-up centric thesis is that all these chains are so different. How will they give a monolithic experience like, let's say, when you have it inside Ethereum, inside Solana, and such, right? That how will you give the same level of experience that a single wallet on a single chain on the same set of infra can give when it is all spread across multiple chains? The answer to that is that that's a technical nuance. Nobody cares about it. We want to make it so seamless that all the chains that are working together can seamlessly interact with one another, and hence the scale is easily tweakable. What do I mean by that, right? Let's break out from the blockchain centric vision and the Web3 nuance and the stuff that we keep talking about all day. Let's look at Web2. Any web service, if anyone has ever designed a web service, they build it for a particular scale. No service has been built for any amount of scale. But the hyperlinks don't change on my website depending on my user traffic. No matter how much user traffic I have, my hyperlink looks the same. My all my outgoing and incoming connections work the same. What changes is the amount of backend servers which are serving those requests. So, for example, I am building a marketplace and it is my local holiday season or my local shopping festival season. What do? I don't change my website, but I beef up my infra. I actually have more services backing up that same infrastructure. And that way, when more and more users come, I can scale up to the demand. But I don't need to keep that forever. After the shopping season ends, if my number of users, decreases because the demand decreases, I can scale that back down. And how much do I pay? I pay as per the demand and the resources that I used. This is the same, thesis that we want to enable on blockchains. That scale will be just a function of how many rollups are there behind it. You will not need to care about how many blockchains are running, which chain is the user on, which chain is that asset on. It doesn't matter. All that matters is no matter how many chains are running, all the assets come together and show up in the user wallet, so to say, as if they were on the same chain. And this is why scalability and interoperability are deeply linked together. If there is no interoperability, the addition of rollup brings so much fragmentation, it doesn't help much. It's like, you know, if you do not like a city, you just cannot wrap this city up and go to a different city, right? That's not how you scale cities, right? So that's not how things work. You have to expand it. You have to expand it in a way where new, visitors or new residents get the same, almost the same experience that's what that was there for existing residents and visitors. Right? That's how you scale cities. That's how you scale web servers. That's how we need to scale blockchains, and that's why it is deeply interlinked. Scalability and interoperability goes hand in hand. Unless we can give a monolithic experience, we cannot just add scale by modularity.
I think that makes sense, and it's kind of interesting. We haven't really had many mass onboarding events in crypto. And for example, whenever there was the Trump coin mania, we saw a huge bottleneck on Solana, and we saw the entire thing break down. So building this infrastructure that can actually support, as Anurag always says, population scale, is definitely the right approach, I think. Um,
Yeah,
you know,
I mean, if sorry, one comment here is that the infrastructure and the resources and the ecosystem that is there on Solana is top notch, right? But even with that, that amount of tooling and resources and performance, which is one of the best in the business, if they are facing the problem of scale, then every chain, no matter how beefy, how much performant they are, they will all face the same problem. And that is where the monolithic experience should prevail, but the monolithic performance will not prevail.
and kind of, talking about like the benefits of Solana, low latency, high throughput is always what folks are talking about. Their slogans accelerate. How does Nexus kind of fit into the latency and throughput conversation?
So if you think about it, what will happen is that every one of these interactions will face some sort of power law effect, right? I mean, we are not talking about an idealistic world where all the applications will have same amount of adoption and same amount of traffic and so on. There will be standard applications on some of the standout chains, and there will be groundbreaking applications on new chains which no one has thought about, and there will be chains which will are hyped up today and applications which are known today which may or may not be known tomorrow. That's the world we are in, right? Every incumbent has always seen threats all around, right? And this the thesis also goes across in a ecosystem which is varyingly accelerating, as they call, like reduce latency and increase bandwidth and such. The only difference here is that when we talk about accelerating the the throughput of a particular chain, of a single chain, you are bound by the laws of physics. I mean, you don't have to worry about all the technology. Um, I mean, if you think about it, there are a lot of chains and a lot of sequencers, for example, who are giving you guarantees for tens of milliseconds of time. The reality is that light takes around 60 milliseconds to cover half of the Earth, around 130 milliseconds to cover round the Earth. So even if you are basically beaming lights all across the Earth, that's what internet is today, it will take a user at least around 130 milliseconds to get any sort of confirmations for their action without considering any delay, zero delay on the processing part. So those are the limits to which you can reduce latency. In terms of throughput, it has similar physics problem, right? Your underwater sea cables are essentially the bottleneck because satellite comms are not as fast. So at the end of the day, it's all about the underwater sea cables and the amount of traffic that they can handle. That is your physics bandwidth limits.
Mhm.
Now let's come to what the experience that you can give on top. On that side, we think that if there are multiple number of chains, each one of them actually not being general purpose but being application specific, then it actually makes a ton more sense. Because when you think about all the interactions within the chain, there will be almost 80% of the interactions, 90% of the interactions all within the chain. And then there may be 10% of the interactions which are cross chain, right? So all you need to do is you can make these roll-ups extremely performant within their own chain. And across this ecosystem, you have to enable free flow of messages. That is what Nexus is about. And the maximal throughput of each of the chains is what DA is about. So that's why you will see that what we offer with Avail DA is the amount of transactions that you can securely process inside each of these rollups and collectively across all the rollups. And the Nexus provides the glue, so to say, so as to make this all these rollups fit together like Lego blocks, so as to create that one monolithic experience.
Right. And you kind of touched on the secure messaging portion of Nexus. Can you just walk us through kind of the security architecture, how Nexus handles the secure messaging? What does that look like broadly?
So Nexus is essentially a collection of protocols. I like to call it like that. Um, the core Nexus runtime is actually a ZK runtime, which verifies all the other gadgets on top. The gadgets being one of ZK interrupt, others being of TE interrupt, and then will be an OP interrupt. Um, why so many things, right? I mean, you might ask, like, Can't you just stick to one particular solution and be done with it? Why is it that you have to make everything so complicated? The answer to that is there is no one solution which fits all. Um, if you see if you look at from the security perspective, ZK offers the best in class security because that's when it becomes verifiable, it becomes trust minimized. All the interactions get the best in class guarantees that is available today, and it fits very, very well with the validity proof that Avail DA provides. So that the light client verifiability across all the chains and DA becomes kind of like reaches a level of guarantee which no other uh, DA and interop can provide today. So that's our long-term thesis. But the reality today is that most roll-ups or many roll-ups are actually optimistic. What that means is that they do not provide ZK proofs, and hence we cannot do ZK interop on top. For them, what we are trying to do is we are trying to provide TE-based security and optimistic security. The TE-based security is simple. We get them run inside secure enclaves so that if you rely that the hardware and providers are honest and they have not been tampered with, then you know that the interaction has not been tampered. So every cross-chain interaction comes with a guarantee that it has been executed untampered within a hardware enclave. That's the guarantee that comes with the TE Nexus. But even with that, some people might look for other kinds of guarantees, which are about rollback protection and insurance. What that means is even if the chain rolls back, I want to be ensured that my funds will not be lost, that my actions will not be lost, that I have protection against it. And for that, we are building the OP Nexus so that, as I mentioned before, no matter what the route is, whether within the ecosystem or beyond, we will provide you with the best in class experience and the best in class security guarantees that we can theoretically offer.
And for users, what type of, trust are users putting into other chains or ecosystem whenever they're connected by Nexus?
It depends on what exactly, but let me give you a few examples, right? When you are interacting with, let's say, a ZK rollup from Avail to another one, another ZK rollup on Ethereum, essentially you are relying on the ZK proof that comes from each of these rollups and the settlement guarantees of Ethereum. That's what you have to rely on. There is another model in which, for example, we are working with partners like AgLayer and such, where even before the proof hits the Ethereum base layer, we will take those intermediate proofs and give guarantees based on that. In that kind of uh, in those kind of scenarios, you rely on the DA records of that rollup on Ethereum and the other DA guarantees that Avail provides to the native rollup. These kind of guarantees are again best in class. Now, if both of them are optimistic rollups, then you have to wait for optimistic challenge periods, or that is not going to be the best experience. So hence we are either relying on solvers and such to take the risk in the short term, whereas the OP Nexus and such can provide those guarantees later, so that even in case of a rollback, no matter where it happens, even if the rollback happens on Ethereum, we will actually provide insurance value to the user so as to protect them from any damages. Now, these are, of course, some examples. There can be many, many examples in between.
Much better than a multi-sig bridge.
Of course. That's a
um,
low threshold that you have set for us.
and in terms of potential use cases from like a user experience point of view for Nexus, what are you envisioning folks building on top of it? You have the obvious ones, cross-chain swaps, you have account abstraction, but what are some of the more interesting things that kind of stand out to you?
So example, I will try to give two things which we have already publicly talked about. Many others are still being developed, and we will keep on releasing more and more of these ideas. One example that I think I shared yesterday or day before that Rachit, our chat engineer, is working on is uh, is that suppose there is a unichain like construct, a chain where all the liquidity resides. If that is the kind of construct in the ecosystem, you and on another chain might not, you might be a user of another chain and you might not have the best rates if you want to swap. Today, what you have to do is you have to take the funds, bridge it to the other chain, swap it there, and then bring it back. That's the canonical flow. What we are doing with Nexus is that you won't have to bridge of any funds at all, and you will not face any delay, because with delays, what happens is the swap rates change because liquidity changes and such, right? So you will get on that instant, whatever was your swap rate, you will get that. Automatically, all the bridging and the fund transfer and the swapping will be done. And then you will get the swapped asset back on that chain in a matter of seconds or minutes, whichever is available at that point in time. If you want the best guarantees, you will have to wait for the ZK proofs, which will take tens of seconds. But if you are okay with optimistic guarantees, it will happen in maybe 3 to 4 seconds, depending on chains. So that's one use case which we are heavily interested on, because we do not believe in the bootstrapping of liquidity for each of the chains across any ecosystem. Today, that is one of the biggest barriers to chain adoption that we are seeing, that every chain is having to bootstrap their own liquidity, which is being a problem. Even today, Unichain themselves are facing the problem, as you might be aware, right? So we think that it's a net negative endeavor for any chain developer to go and do that, and that's why we want to provide access to liquidity, not liquidity itself, but access to liquidity for any new incoming chain without losing their user. That's one thing. The other one, which we have also showed a kind of demo, is that suppose a user wants to use Aave on base, but they don't have the funds there. They have the funds on a chain which is secured by Avail. Let's say they have funds on Sophon. What we want to enable is that a Sophon user be able to access the Aave markets on base or on Ethereum without facing any experience issues, right? That they all will be one click, so to say, or basically 1 or 2 clicks, depending on chains and approvals and such, which we are
Yeah.
beyond our control. But they all will be a few clicks within seconds. They will be able to go and maybe supply their assets on an Aave market of their choice. Those are the kind of use cases that we are extremely bullish on. There are other use cases which I want to talk about in terms of contingent transactions and such, but maybe more on that later.
Cool. Love it. Well, we're coming up to the top of the hour. Wanted to open it up to the community for questions. So we'll see if there's any comments that stream through. Maybe in the meantime, we can talk about timelines because we already saw that questions pop up. Nexus is already in DevNet. DevNet has been achieved internally. When do we expect testnet to go live and then the public release of Nexus?
We are actively working on the testnet. The testnet, in some shape, is ready, but again, we being very finicky with saying anything very rash, we want to be absolutely sure that this is something that people can use. We are already working not only on the testnet of the Nexus backend, but some of the SDK bits as well. I would say in 1 or 2 months, we should have the Nexus testnet ready. But if there is a developer who wants early access and such, uh, they can reach out to us. Happy to listen to their use case and build something very custom for them that they can start using today. That will not be a problem.
Love that. Okay. Well, I don't see any questions coming through. But if anyone is interested in learning more, feel free to reach out. Always happy to chat with folks looking to build on Avail. We're going to be doing a couple more of these AMAs, but wanted to thank everyone that tuned in. Thank you, Prabal. I know you're busy. You're in the trenches right now trying to get this all ready. So appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks a lot for having me. Thanks for everyone who tuned in, and see you guys soon.
Take care, folks. Let's catch you next time.
Thank you. Bye.